Daisy Nam is the director and curator of CCA Wattis Institute of Contemporary Art in San Francisco. From 2020 to 2022, she served as director and curator of Ballroom Marfa, a contemporary art space dedicated to supporting artists through residencies, commissions, and exhibitions. From 2015 to 2019, she was the assistant director at the Carpenter Center for the Visual Arts at Harvard. And from 2008 to 2015, she produced 7 seasons of talks, screenings, performances, and workshops, which makes me exhausted already just thinking about it, as the assistant director of public programs at the School of the Arts at Columbia University. Daisy's curatorial residencies and fellowships include Marcia Tucker, Senior Research Fellow at the New Museum, 2020, Bellas Artes in Bataan, the Philippines, also in 2020, Surf Point in New York, Maine, 2019, Gwangju Biennale Foundation in 2018, and she's taught at RISD and lectured at Lesley University, Northeastern, SMFA, Tufts, and here at SVA as a visiting critic. She co-edited the publication Best, Letters from Asian Americans in the Arts with Paper Monument in 2021. And with that, I'll just say that Daisy will speak for about 50 minutes. At that point, if you've got a question or comment for Daisy, please put it at the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And with that, welcome, Daisy.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm so happy to be here, and just wanted to thank you and SVA and Ree for organizing everything so seamlessly. And I'm excited to share some projects with you. I'm going to start sharing screen, so let me know if the screen looks funny for whatever reason. So happy to be here. And I know that you just mentioned Best, Letters from Asian Americans in the Arts. And I actually wanted to start here because the last time I spoke at SVA in 2019 was a roundtable that SVA had invited me and several other folks from the Asia Art Archive reading group. It was called the Leadership Camp. But we had just um, uh, finished this camp, and through the topic of model minorities, we had presented some ideas that we had shared throughout the year. And in that roundtable, we realized, okay, what if we did a public element to this leadership camp, this reading group that we did? And that's when Chris Ho, who was the director at the time, and I co-edited this book. So I just wanted to start there because thank you to SVA for kind of like putting out this public element of all the things that we had read and talked about. And it really kind of formulated some ideas that we wanted to present in another public realm, which is this book. But this book actually included more than just the folks that were at the Asia Art Archive in America, and it included 70 letters from Asian Americans in the art world. Of course, we could have gone on. I think our list was 500 people, but we had to save trees, and we wanted this just to be a starting point for other folks to make other volumes. And the format was a letter, and it was during COVID, and it was at a time where, you know, there was a lot of Asian hate and a lot of disconnection amongst the art world and our communities. And so we had invited artists to write letters to whoever they wanted, really. And what we received was incredible. And of course, you know, even the term Asian American, we can challenge that a bit. What does that mean to be an Asian American in the arts? These definitions don't really define us. The letters were so wide-ranging. Some were really hysterically funny, some were strange, some were conceptual. You know, the format of all these letters really ranged, as does many of these artists and curators and writers that we invited. So it was great to have this compilation of folks in this book. But I just wanted to start there because SVA did play a part in some of that thinking. But I actually wanted to also mention, you know, that I started off as a public programmer, and university contexts have been really important to me. when doing this series of public programs at Columbia University, I was at the art school and, we're one of many, many schools, and trying to find connection points between artists and lots of different areas of studies was really interesting in building that audience. And for me personally, I had my job before this was at the Guggenheim in development. So it was a very different type of realm in many ways, but I really wanted to get to a place where I could think about ideas alongside artists. So I learned so much about process through so many of these public programs that these artists had presented, including, I'm just giving you some posters and a few here. Alfredo Jar, he talked about strategies of representation. And of course, he's an incredible conceptual artist, and he shared with the students what his practice was like. And Isaac Julian, there's so many artists that I had learned from doing this series, these many series of public programs. So I just kind of wanted to share that my beginning was actually as a programmer, and kind of learning as much as I could about everyone's process. In addition, there were lots of screenings and many talks and workshops. And I think that kind of environment where discourse is really important, I think that helped me as a curator to find the connections of where an artist would want to go. So I knew that I wanted to work with living artists and kind of work closely alongside them and develop ideas alongside them. And now I'm currently at the Wattis Institute for Contemporary Art here in San Francisco. I just started a few months ago, I think 4 or 5 months ago. So I'm definitely new to campus and new to the city of San Francisco. But what really excited me was to be back in this context of a learning institution. Um, and I just wanted to share this really fun drawing that Abraham Cruzavillas sent to us, because the Wattis is out actually moving back on campus, and we're opening in our new space. The school CCA has consolidated a lot of their different buildings, which existed in the city of San Francisco, but also in Oakland, and closed the Oakland campus, and everything is now centralized in San Francisco. So the Wattis is part of this new building, and we're really excited to be part of the studios. And we're on the second level. You'll see it's really expansive. There's beautiful gardens and lots of space, but right underneath us are all the artist studios, the workshops. We're right near ceramics, and across the way from us is the textile dye garden. So lots of really interesting energy, and I'm sure at SVA you feel the same way, being surrounded by many makers and artists. So that's a really exciting moment for the Wattis, because previously for about 12 years, the Wattis was located 3 or 4 blocks away, but I think it felt really far, and that those few blocks, a lot of students didn't venture so far, but now we're right back on the campus, so we're excited to be here. And here's just an image of the sculpture studios that are right below us. I wanted to share a little bit about the show that's coming up, and this is not the first show at the Wattis. We're opening in 2 weeks, and my colleague Jean Garrity is organizing a really incredible landscape show for that. But right after that is a show that I put together for a Ballroom Marfa called Steady, and it's Michelle Lopez and Esther Partegas, and that show is traveling to the Wattis in January. And I just wanted to share some ideas and concepts around that show. And I thought this was a great show to bring to the Wattis, as we're opening this new space, we're building up the grounds, and also building new communities. And these incredible two artists, Michelle Lopez and Esther Partegas, these sculptors have really helped me think about not only how they use material and physically build their works, but also what does it mean to build more conceptually, like how is the world built around us? um, how do we depend on each other? And a lot of their works have these material elements that physically, lean on each other, hold each other up. And so Here are some images of the show that was in ballroom, but for the Wattis, because of the different physical size of the gallery, we're changing the show up a little bit. So some of these works won't be in the show and some will, but lots of the elements in the show really helped me understand through also like playful ways. Esther's work in particular uses a lot of color, and you can see the things she uses, these laundry baskets, and the kind of precarious disco ball that hangs between, and a slight shift in that could kind of make everything fall apart, but it's held together. And I think Michelle Works does that as well. So we're really excited to have these sculptures at the Wattis. Here's another view. You can see on the left, just by the scale of the person viewing the artwork. This is Michelle Lopez's Angel series, and she created the series after 9/11 and kind of using the debris and the refuse of the built environment around us, and the beauty of that, but also of these buildings, these like really incredible structures, but also the precarity of that as well. And so for the Wattis installation, Michelle is actually creating for us a outdoor sculpture. So this is just some images of her process in the studio in Philly. And she's creating a large scale fiberglass piece for us that will sit in the gardens that you see up here in the lot. So we're excited to have that come to the Wattis. But I also wanted to share some of the works that I did at Ballroom, where I was for about 4.5 years. And it's a really interesting place in West Texas. Many have heard about it. It's where Donald Judd had set up his studio, and also his museum, which is Chinati. And Ballroom is the contemporary art space out in West Texas in Marfa. And so through the visual arts program and the music program, presenting really interesting commissions and works that the town of Marfa can enjoy, but also there was such a wide audience of people flying in from all over to see the Judds, but also trying to give them a different element and a different kind of viewpoint of what they can experience in Marfa through these contemporary art practices. So the last project I did is also an outdoor piece. So I had a lot of outdoor opportunities. Is this incredible piece by Guadalupe Maravilla, Mariposa Relampago. And um, he made this piece actually for the ICA Boston, but of course wanted to travel it. And Lupe was one of our visiting artists in residence. And when I asked him, what do you want to make? And he's like, well, I just made this insane thing. You should show this. So, of course, with our outdoor sculpture garden or space, it was the perfect venue for this piece. And if you don't know about Lupe's practice, he um, is a sculptor, and through his kind of journeys migrating to the US, it's all part of the work itself. And of course, in such playful ways, this piece has literal hundreds of pieces that are attached to it. So it's an actual physical bust that he has completely revamped. And through working with artisans and also picking things up from markets in Mexico City, has attached all these elements to the bus itself. And it's also a healing instrument. And so as a cancer survivor, sound healing was a really interesting integral part to his life at that point, and now has continued into the artwork itself. So you could lay in the bus, and as sound healers activate the gongs that he has installed, can feel the vibrations. So this is kind of an outdoor view of the piece. But what was really beautiful about having this piece here, not only because he was an artist in residence and he had been to Marfa in Texas a few times, was to actually partner with two other museums in Texas. I know, in the news, you can read about all the issues around border politics and what's happening on the border. Marfa is only 50 miles away from the border, and partnering with the Contemporary in Austin with Alex Klein, and in the Blaffer at University of Houston with Erica Holcomb, the 3 venues within the state of Texas, we really kind of put our heads together and said, "Let's bring this piece here." It was, a heavy lift because it's such a huge piece, but together collaboratively, we really thought it was important, to be able to talk about these issues around migration and immigration and healing and, folks who, feel the, violence of it all in their bodies. So, when Lupe was in Marfa, he talked to, border patrol agents and how does that affect your day-to-day life? Not only on a political scale, but I think, his work is also like person by person and that kind of relationship to humans. This is a view of it at nighttime, so it lit up, which was really beautiful. It looks like it's just gonna, jet off into space. It was one of the most beautiful works that we had put into the courtyard. This is him playing and doing the sound ceremony with the gongs that he's attached to the bus. And he also worked with high school students who had immigrated to Texas from Mexico and did this incredible mural. And so one of the great things about being in Marfa was, of course, the landscape and the history. And there is the Judd history, but there's also the natural world that surrounds this really incredible place. And during COVID, my colleague Sarah Melendez and I thought, what could we do to help artists in this really tough moment? And so many artists had a lot of their projects canceled, especially musicians. Sarah is the music curator, was the music curator at Ballroom. So I think, 100% of their tours got canceled. And so working with visual artists and musicians, we kind of offered this space kind of in nature where, you can kind of spread out and do what you want to do, really. It was a carte blanche. And we kind of offered not only the natural surroundings, but we had a house for them and, had a modest budget. But what really grew out of that were many conversations that then led to commissions or part of future shows. So it was really the time that we spent with them and helped them investigate what they wanted to go deeper in. This is Lupe. I don't even know if you can see. He's like this tiny little thing in the huge canyon with Jesse Chun, who's filming outside in the landscape, and Morgan Bassicus, who had access to this beautiful piano in a closed restaurant. So we kind of opened up different spaces for them. El Perez, of course, also in New York, got to shoot around West Texas. And EJ Hill was actually the first artist in resident, or sorry, the second. Roberto Carlos Lange was the first. And he, during COVID, said, I don't want to perform. I don't know if I even want to make visual arts right now. I actually want to go to my first passion, which was music. So he kind of, when he was younger, had to choose between visual arts and music. And, at this moment of pause, he said, well, why don't I just sing again? And so he came and did a music residency. So he recorded songs with his music partner, Frey, and they then went on to make an album. So I think this time was really fruitful, and this residency really helped lead to so many other things for artists. And thinking about site, Ken Tam was another artist. He wasn't part of the residency, but he really used the natural surroundings and the history of the place to really think about something that he had wanted to, which led to this show. Tender is the hand which holds the stone of memory. Sorry, long title. But for this show, he had actually made this 2-channel video here for the Queen's Museum, but wanted to kind of expand on that. And so he made a body of sculptures. And when he was investigating the Chinese railroad workers, at the same time as the Chinese railroad workers were the cowboys. And so he kind of put those these figures together and tried to think about what was happening at the same time as a cowboy, the kind of symbol of masculinity, but also manifest destiny. And then, of course, at the same time, were the cowboys making the railroads, making the actual structures that built America and connected the ways that we could, transport goods and sell them, or military. equipment that can be transported, especially alongside the border, which was in West Texas. So for Ken, we went to several sites, and there were all these remnants of the Chinese laborers, but of course their histories weren't as recorded as well. And so he, through these sculptures that you see that are on the floor, took earth and food particles. So there was one piece that was written about a journal that it recorded all the foods that the Chinese workers brought with them. So mushrooms, jujube seeds, sunflower seeds. And so can integrate that into the sculpture that you see on the floor. So it was a really beautiful way of further investigating something that he had already worked on through this film. And I wanted to share this show that happened at Ballroom. It was a really quiet show, but it was one of the most meaningful because through these artists that were included in the show, I was able to learn alongside them about something that I had always was curious about and wanted to learn about, which is the way that language can be used. And in Marfa, which was segregated, a lot of the folks that are from this part of the country, and before Texas was Texas, it was Mexico. And the local school that is there, it's a really beautiful school called the Blackwell School. It was segregated, but one of the things that happened was that the students were told not to speak Spanish. In fact, there was this whole ritual, and it was called burying Mr. Spanish, and all the students had to write that on a piece of paper, "I will not speak Spanish," and bury it in the ground. And so this caused a lot of trauma and a lot of, memories about not only their mother tongue, but what was so inspiring, and I learned this through Jesse's film that you see, that's projected onto the face of Ballroom, was that the students who are now probably in their 70s had made another ritual, was to unbury Mr. Spanish, and so they unburied their mother tongue, and I thought that that was such a powerful gesture that they had done. So Jesse, during her residency here, made a film outdoors, also inspired by the Blackwell School. But the show included several artists that used language. There was some histories that were kind of tied together here. Jorge Mendes Blake built this sculpture that had, I think it was 1,200 bricks. I mean, to put this together was really a challenge for the art handlers. But as you can see this in this detail shot, there's this little slip of paper that says "Hide a Poem." And he was influenced by going to Warsaw and going to the Jewish ghetto and finding, through talking to the historians there were found there were scraps of paper that, even though they were sequestered and in the ghetto, they were trying to communicate with, folks outside of the ghetto. But not only was there information that can be shared, more useful information, but he also learned that there were poems and poetic language that was also hidden. So that's kind of this human will to survive through poetry and sharing language with each other. Jerome Ellis is also a really incredible artist that his photographs were included in the show. This is his Badland series, but he is an artist and a musician that has a stutter. And what was so beautiful that he shared with me was saying, my stutter manifests itself through pausing, but in my body and in my mind, I've already started speaking, and it's my way of speaking. It's just that the outside world doesn't know the way that I speak. And I just thought that kind of reversal and shift in framework, I was like, of course, like we should learn how you speak. You're forced to learn the way that we speak. And, fluency is so much currency in our society. So in such a beautiful way and succinct way, he kind of shared that. And alongside the photographs, he also had soundtracks of his album called The Clearing. And if you haven't listened to it, it's incredible. There's not only jazz and music, there's spoken word, and it's a really beautiful album. Here's another shot of Jessie Chun's video that she created for this exhibition that's indoor. So there was an outdoor element and an indoor element. And another artist who, Nakai Flote, who's actually an academic, but is from the region in West Texas, from Presidio, and is actually trying to help reclaim the lost language of Lapanapachi, which is her tribe. So really through sound, and we had a Terra grant that allowed her to go to the Smithsonian and listen to a lot of recordings of peyote songs. So, when she shared with me, the recordings of peyote songs, which is really from this region, the only recordings that I know of are in DC. They're not even in West Texas. So we wrote a grant and we sent her, and she was able to listen to them. And because they're for, her people and for specific rituals, she didn't want to share them again. It's really for very specific rituals. So she actually did a sound piece where it was more influenced by the peyote songs, but not of them directly. So I guess I'm also gonna talk about site. And before ballroom, I was at the Carpenter Center, and of course it's another educational institution. I just can't escape them. I really just really love them. But it's based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's the Contemporary Art Center at Harvard, and in this really beautiful, famous Le Corbusier building. That is, if you go to the Harvard Art Museum, it's connected through a ramp. And here's some shots of it, some exterior shots of it. And of course, like Columbia, there was so much around the discourse that can happen in an institution like this. And so working on public programs is really incredible. Here's a performance lecture that Basma Sharif did, showing films, but also reading some of the works that she has written, and Douglas Crimp. I mean, there were so many, Charles Atlas, there's so many incredible artists that came to share their work with the students, but also finding those connections, an artist's research and let's say like a political scientist or historian or an architect just down the street, and having that kind of confluence of ideas is a really special dynamic that happens at a academic university. And this was actually my last show at the Carpenter Center, but it was such a special one with Matt Keegan, who's based in New York, an incredible artist. And the shape of the building is quite unique, and so it's hard to infiltrate. It's a brutalist building. It's really hard to kind of understand where you are, and all made of cement and quite beautiful. But Matt, for his show, came to do a site visit and really felt the need to, in some way, soften the space. And so he, what you see here is these cardboard pieces that almost they're woven together. So cardboard, very simple material, woven together, and it almost makes not only a beautiful pattern, but almost a basket. So it kind of held the space together and softened it a little bit and held all the works together. And so for the show, he also included these sculptures that he placed on top of this cardboard, and a mirrored piece as well, a text mirrored piece. The sculpture you see here actually was made out of a paper folding that he had done, and then he blew it up to be 13 feet tall, but again using a very simple material, simple way of making shapes and form, and then kind of expanding that into this metal form. But the show itself, there's so much around formation. It's quite abstract, but there's so much around how things are formed, and how, again, language is used. In the little screening room, he showed a film called Generation, and he had interviewed his family members and kind of posed these questions out to them. What is love to you? What is race. That was a really interesting one because his little niece, who was I think 7 at the time, is like, "Oh, when me and my friends, run and who can run the fastest?" And then he asks his dad, and of course his dad has a completely different answer, kind of reliving his time in New York where there was his neighbor had lots of races that were all mixed together. So as in, ethnicity and race and culture. So that kind of those types of definitions and how they're formed from different types, different generations, and how you get to basically learn what you do. And it was a two channel. So one channel was these interviews and the other channel were these animations, and he would ask, if love was a shape, what would it look like? If it was a color, what would it look like? So these two kind of images are simultaneously shown together. Um, Also to kind of like soften the space, he used this curtain that we had commissioned, and Corbusier had this color system, and using that color system, wove that together too, and put it more into a textile form. And so it would kind of billow, and you can see it through the glass as well. So another way to not only invite folks in, but also to soften the installation and the space inside. Other ways to kind of activate the space in this brutalist building was performance. So this is a performance that was part of a exhibition um, that Liz Munsell, who's now at the Jewish Museum, she had guest curated, but we worked on this performance together, and it was a show around Chilean um, artists from the 70s, and also included and paired up were contemporary Chilean artists. So here, Carmen Bouchot, incredible choreographer, had made this piece in the 70s and then worked with Johanna Unzueta and Felipe Mojica to create this updated version of it using the ground floor of the Carpenter Center as the stage. And these kind of tent-like forms, the dancers would get inside of them and dance with them. And this is Carmen, who actually did a workshop with us. She had been in New York and actually was the assistant to Robert Rauschenberg for many years, but felt the need to go back to her home country, even though her mother said, it's really dangerous here. You should stay in the US. But she really felt the need to come back and share, dance with her people. And so she has been living in Chile since the 80s. Another incredible show that I worked with Dina Deitch in the space was We Just Fit You and I. And this is kind of, challenging the space of the Carpenter Center. Le Corbusier had this golden rule, and everything was proportional to the height of what he thought was the perfect height, I guess, which is 6'1", which is a European scale, um, white man scale. And so this show kind of subverts that. And so using not only light, which you can see here with Pamela Rosenkranz's work, so the kind of lines and proportions that are the physical structure of the Carpenter Center are diffused through Pamela's light installation. There was also this performance by Michelle Lopez, and I wanted to include this because, I'm working with her now again, and these kind of artists that come back and try different things. And with this, she used the movement and in the space, and worked with musicians studying at Harvard, and the local school at Berkeley, and also NEC, the New England Conservatory, and created this performance where they're constrained. They have these, I don't know if you can see these harnesses that she's kind of pulling on, but they're also trying to use flutes and like wind instruments, and walking through the space of the Carpenter Center to kind of not only challenge the idea of like the brutalist measurements that Corbusier had enforced in the building, and to use sound and things that move through the space to kind of think anew about that. And um, I think I wanna end there, but maybe one thing that I'll also share, is kind of back to the beginning where, um um, an artist, Katerina Buren, who teaches at the Carpenter Center at Harvard, and a really great writer, Claire Barliant, had made this book, and it was called Museum Memories, and they had both asked, folks to think back about their favorite museum memory, and it actually was one of my first museum memories, so I thought I would just end with this because it kind of has been the through line for me, including what I had experienced with Michelle's work, that you saw on the slide before, but it kind of recounts my first museum job, and I might just read it just because it's a kind of a fun memory and it really has stayed with me. But I had talked about my first job at the Santa Monica Museum of Art, and I said, "It was the fall of 2001. I was a gallery guard at the Santa Monica Museum of Art working at the opening of Freestyle, a group show that had traveled from the Studio Museum in Harlem to Los Angeles. I was witnessing a generation of artists who broke apart forms, used new materials, found different ways to articulate what it meant to live and be. When works or exhibitions create that atmosphere of feelings, it becomes embodied and it starts in my stomach and burrows deep into my bones. It first happened then and sometimes happens now." And that's something that has stayed with me when something really affects me on a emotional embodied way, and just being curious about that and trying to find different ways that I could work with artists that kind of recapture that type of feeling, but also, it's a different way of, knowledge sharing as well. And, yeah, I hope that I can continue that at the Wattis. So I'm just gonna end with this slide of the Wattis. And please come visit if you're ever in San Francisco.
Wonderful, great. So I've just put a note to ask questions now in the Q&A. There is
Okay.
one from Samuel Kim. Hi, what a wonderful presentation. Thank you. Considering your career working with institutions, I'm curious if the way that you've met, researched, invited artists has changed across institutions, or if different institutions have allowed different ways to meet artists. And then how many studio visits do you conduct a week?
Oh, wow. Okay, there's many parts to that. How many studio visits? I'll go backwards. How many
Okay.
studio visits? Because I am also the director, there's a lot of admin, so I really want to do more, but I can't. But I try to do at least one every 2 weeks, whether it's, on Zoom or in person. I prefer in person, to be honest, just because then you can kind of see the physical surroundings of the artist and how they make even the books that are on their shelves, or, things that they pin up. But I try to do one every 2 weeks. But also one thing that this is just my personal style, but I try to be in touch with artists that I've known for a long time. So even if I've worked with them, like for instance, Kenneth Tam, I was just texting with him just to ask like, "Oh, how's it going with your new show that's opening at Bridget Donahue?" Just to see what they're working on. Cause to me, it's kind of a lifelong um friendship and relationship with artists, I hope. And it really excites me when you work with an artist, it may have opened doors or different avenues for their practice, and then you get to see the next chapter of what they're making. So I like to do little check-ins with artists that I've known. And then the question around, has choosing artists changed depending on the institution? I think that was one part of the question.
Right.
Yes, for sure. I think um, for instance, at the Carpenter Center, because it's an educational institution and there's lots of different departments and lots of areas of research, you I kind of thought that artists who appreciate that would, really benefit from it. So I probably wouldn't choose an artist that, strictly needed material things, like I just wanna make something in my studio and wanna try out this new resin or something, like, that probably wouldn't be as fruitful. I think someone who's like, I also want to meet, a journalist who's studying this or writing about this or this or this, So I think that type of artist could benefit. And also in Marfa, yeah, artists who I thought also could benefit in that surrounding I invited. So I think different institutions invites different types of artists, and it's you don't know 100%, but it's a feeling. So, studio visits, talking with artists, you can kind of tell or sense what they could do. I never wanted to dictate, like, come here and make this, like that never works out. So you kind of have to listen and be attuned with what their interests are. For example, with EJ, like he told me, like, I don't want to perform right now. I don't want to make sculptures. I just want to sing. I was like, well, why don't come out to Marfa and sing your heart out, It's lots of empty space and a comfortable house, and you can kind of read if you want. So like different listening to artists at different points in their practice too is, I think, important.
Hmm.
I think there was a third part to that, but I'm not sure if I answered everything.
Let's see. I'm curious if the way that you have met, researched, invited artists has changed across, you answered that. Or if different institutions have allowed different ways to meet artists.
That's an interesting question. I've never thought about the institutions giving you different ways to meet artists. I'm not sure. I think as a curator, you have to find your way to meet the artists that
Mhm.
you want to. So you kind of have to maybe set out to meet the artist. But I don't think I would rely on the institution, to be honest. But actually, no, at a school, there are, you know, different departments that bring in artists through their department. And so that is a mechanism where you could,
Right.
if you're curious enough, you can ask them what they're up to and who are you inviting for, textiles department or something like that, and
Yeah.
see what they're up to.
Um, well, to follow that, and then I'll read another question. Since you do keep these relationships with artists over time, does that mean that you continue to curate them into shows over time?
Well, so like Michelle, I included her show at the Carpenter Center because that was a performance. And I always wanted to do something else object based with her. And so when I was putting together the ballroom show in the Land of Judd, I knew 100% I had to invite her to be in conversation with that, as a feminist sculptor, as a Filipino woman. Like, it just was too rich not to have Michelle's work and Esther's in conversation in that place. And of course, that conversation changes when it comes to San Francisco. So I'm curious how it'll be received here. But sometimes, yeah, you kind of find different ways to work with them over and over again, but in a new way. It's not like slotting them in here or there, but kind of finding out what they're interested in. And Dina Deitch, who curated that show and I helped her with that, is doing also another solo exhibition with Michelle Lopez, but actually using her sound practice as a sculptor and a sound artist. So I think maybe, she was like, now I want to investigate sound with Michelle. So, it's kind of these journeys that we go on, what's interesting for us and for the artist at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, next, second question. Please give us a glimpse of how you make a show. How do you develop a concept? What are the milestones you depend upon to see it through to the end? It would be great to know how much of your work starts in theory, history, and how much begins in the realm of the personal.
Oh, that's such a good question. I think it's a little bit of both. For instance, the language show, I had been reading, of course, a lot of Gloria Anzaldúa because she is such a important writer of Borderlands. And I was in a Borderland. And so I was reading a lot of her work or rereading a lot of her work because I read it in grad school. But as I was reading it, there were other conversations that were happening with Jesse, with Nakai. And sometimes what happens is things organically come together. And so I'm thinking about Gloria, who's the title of the show comes from her text, and she writes this essay in the 80s, kind of it's kind of an anthem for marginalized women writers of color, like, "Get out your paintbrushes, get out your pens, start writing, you have tongues on fire, you have many things to say." And so, when I was thinking about that and language and then, talking it I do share with artists what I'm thinking about sometimes and just curious what they if they have something to respond to, and through many conversations, I think that show came together really nicely, and so it was kind of built on Gloria, but then added and, organically through many other conversations, created, so I think it's half and half, and I think one thing that I've learned is to listen, and they never teach you that in school, how to listen as a curator. Because sometimes the will to make something a show, which you need a lot of drive because it's really hard. Sometimes, there's always uphill battles around shipping or budget or space, but sometimes the challenges and blocks, you have to listen to them too. And sometimes you have to let go a really good idea because it's just not happening, and so listening to an artist and hearing what they're saying and then trying to, mediate that and trying to kind of come up with a vision together, I think is really important, part of the process, yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about that with the students later. Listening.
Yeah,
Um,
listening.
okay, there are no other questions, so thank you, Daisy, and thanks to the audience. Next week, Hu Hanru will be the guest on the roundtable for those who want to join us. And Daisy, with that, let's leave and come back to the link with the students.
Okay, thank you so
Great,
much.
thank you. See you
Bye.
in a minute. Bye.